country, and pay my respect to the traditional owners of country, not just here, but throughout Australia, from all the different lands where you're coming from, and recognising their connection to lands, waters and communities. E1 has a really vibrant First Nations outreach program, and we'll be actually looking, we've got a new leader in that space, Gemma, and she's actually developing a new strategy for us to expand our First Nations engagement and right across New South Wales. It's something that we're really excited to do, because we're honoured when we're actually given the privilege of going onto country and working with First Nations people around energy and sometimes water issues that are really a big challenge for them. So for anyone that's joining us today as First Nations, thanks for joining us and thanks for working with us. And I think that's where I just hand over to...
Thank you, Janine.
Monique from my office, who's going to introduce the capability shift, empowering Ombudsman officers to deliver better outcomes. Over to you, Monique. Thanks.
Thanks, Janine, and thank you to everybody for joining. I'm actually going to take this opportunity to hand over to Grant, who is actually going to facilitate this panel session for us today, and he will do the introductions of the panel members.
Cool. Thank you. Let me just sort some technical issues out that I'm having, and I will be with you in 1 second.
I might just take this opportunity to let everybody know that we actually are recording this session today, because some people couldn't make it, so we did have a request to record. So I have set this up to be recorded.
Cool. Thank you. All right, so welcome everybody to our session. I'd like to introduce our panel for the day. So we have Monique, Head of People, Culture and Capability at E1, and has been there for the past 2 years, has led P&C functions for not-for-profit across a number of sectors, including health, community services and early education. We have Caroline, who is the General Manager, People and Culture from EWOF. Past 2 years, previously worked in large complex organisations, including financial, professional services and the legal industries. Hello, Caroline. We have Leonie Jones, Manager People and Capability at EWOC for the past 7 years. Prior to that, has worked across a number of public sectors in large departments and statutory authorities. We have Marcus, Head of Organisational Development at the Utilities Dispute in New Zealand. Welcome, Marcus. Was there from 2012 to 2018, gained some experience in regulatory, financial and government sector, and came back to UDL in 2021. And myself, Grant, I am the People and Capability Officer here and been here for 13 years. So let's get into our session for today. And we will start with Monique. So what has changed and why our current capability models are under pressure? So from your perspective, what has changed the most significantly in the operating environment for the Ombudsman's office over the past few years, and why does that demand a different capability profile today?
Thank you, Grant. So I'm going to speak to this at a fairly high level. For us at E1, new and expanding jurisdictions is playing a role, as managing disputes in one space isn't necessarily the same when you're moving into a different jurisdiction. So that's a learning curve for everybody. One of the big things, though, that's changed also is consumer expectations and demands. So we're now operating in the world of what I've been advised is called prosumers. So we've got knowledgeable consumers, they've done their research, they want resolution in a shorter time frame, and they've actually got higher expectations of us. We've also got higher volumes of complaints and more complex matters presenting, and that requires a higher level of technical expertise. The necessary focus on customer experience and the diverse circumstances of those who are reaching out to us, as well as the behaviours that our people are dealing with, means that trauma-informed practice, skills relevant to accidental counselling and managing inappropriate behaviours are even more important now. psychosocial safety overall and our concerns for our people raise the capability needs in risk, safety and wellbeing management. And there's a significant focus for us on upskilling, coaching and developing not only our people, but collateral to support them at the same time that we're dealing with backlog pressure and just delivering on the volume of work that comes through. Concurrently, members' expectations have increased. We've got more automation, digitisation and the use of AI. And so members are expecting faster turnaround times as well. Leadership responsibility within organisations is more complex too, particularly around psychosocial safety, the need to be future focused, and to have the skills and capability to manage change effectively. The other thing I think that's different in our organisations now is that since COVID, our employees have different expectations of us as an organisation. And that just creates another layer that has an organisational impact. So overall, it drives a different capability profile because our people need to have more technical skills, they need to have more people skills, they need to be more resilient, they need to be more agile, they need to be able to adapt to change. And leadership in this world of work is more demanding and more complex. So bottom line is we all need more tools in our toolbox, our toolkit, to effectively resolve disputes, to manage different stakeholders' needs, and to ensure that individual and team safety and wellbeing is looked after. And our leaders need more skills to lead our people in a really complex and evolving and ever-changing environment. I'm going to hand over to Leonie now, though, who's got some additional insights that she'd like to share regarding that changing operational environment. Leonie.
Thanks, Monique. Very similar sort of themes, I think, that come through in terms of the capabilities that we see that are required as well. But certainly calling out, you mentioned, the expanded jurisdictions, but it's the legislation and regulation and probably compliance piece that sits around that as well. And there's impacts for both our leaders and team members in relation to those sorts of areas. More broadly, items like information privacy, you've mentioned the psychosocial safety, but the understanding of the requirements that we have under a code of practice. We're needing quasi-legal policy knowledge and capability really broadly across the teams. Information security and cyber security, the impact on our agencies and also the individuals in terms of security requirements, the risk of data breaches more broadly, but then scams and phishing are real for our people in terms of the need for individual understanding of how to manage those, that digital capability, as well as the specialised ICT capability as well, I think, in that space. You mentioned AI in the context of the member expectations, but obviously there's a lot of discussion at the moment about how it's impacting in that customer space as well. It's adding to the complexity in the complaints management space. It's increasing the investigation burden. It's putting an onus on our people to scan technical jargon and legal content that may or may not be correct. There can be obvious benefits in its use, but navigating it is something that is quite new, and it does add to the challenge. Again, there's a need for a quasi-policy legal knowledge in relation to that. The digital capability, along with really strong judgment and confidence in your own knowledge of the legislation, regulations, etc. Probably lastly, I'd just finish with the affordability for all and cost of living pressures. So certainly we're seeing that in the customer base, but there's also, we need to recognise the impact on our team members as well. So their resilience and that emotional intelligence to be able to interact with customers in hardship or, with really high stakes in relation to some of these cases, and new customers that haven't needed our services historically, when potentially they may be going through their own issues in relation to cost of living. So I think overall the breadth of skills and knowledge and the depth of the capabilities required is growing, and we need, as you called out, Monique, that adaptability and the ability to be flexible and resilient is something that's going to continue.
Cool.
Thanks.
Thank you, Leonie. Thank you, Monique. So we'll move on to topic 2, defining capability, what good looks like now. And Caroline, so how has the role of the modern Ombudsman reshaped how you think about capability within your organisation, and what have you done to address this?
Thanks, Grant. So at EWOP, the transition to being a modern ombudsman scheme has really been a significant and probably primary focus over the last few years. So where previously our approach had centred around resolution predominantly through that shuttle conciliation approach, we've really needed to evolve in order to meet the expectations of the community, consumers and the industry. And so this has really meant for us embedding those core principles of independence, fairness, consistency, effectiveness and efficiency, and ensuring that they're really protected no matter where a complaint sits in our process. It's also meant that focus on providing additional and more tailored support to consumers experiencing vulnerability, generating those meaningful insights that will help drive systemic improvement and prevent complaints hopefully happening in the first place, as well as obviously improving awareness and accessibility so more people can engage with us and aware of the service that we provide. And at the same time, we're obviously operating in an environment that is becoming more complex every year. It's incredibly dynamic, but as well as that, and as Leonie and Monique have pointed out, you know, there's complex consumer behaviour, social pressures, all of those things that has really sort of shifted the skills and capabilities that we need. And so for us, this has meant sort of focusing on judgment and critical thinking as being absolutely essential in a world where jurisdictions, regulations, expectations are constantly changing. What we need from our people now is to be able to make sound, defensible decisions in situations that, as we all know, are very rarely black and white, so that judgment just becomes so essential. We've also need the strong data and insight capability. So that's no longer just a nice to have, it's critical, absolutely critical if we want to extend our impact beyond individual cases and identify those systemic issues that can help to drive broader improvement across the energy and water sector. In such a dynamic environment and in the world of constant change that we all exist in now, those skills of resilience, adaptability and confidence in navigating ambiguity have become foundational capabilities, not just for individuals but for the organisation as a whole, so that we can navigate these unpredictable and uncertain sort of times. We also need to bring that genuine continuous improvement mindset, which is a willingness to learn, reflect and adapt as our environment evolves. And throughout all of this, I guess one of our big priorities has been, though, that we retain those capabilities that make EWOB special. So for us, that's about retaining the care and compassion that our people bring, that strong sense of purpose, our empathy, so that we're not losing the heart of who we are throughout this sort of constant change environment. And so for us at EWOB, what that's looked like is we've spent time obviously designing and embedding a new complaint handling model. And this wasn't just about a process or a sort of rigid step-by-step approach. It's been about supporting our people through better decision making, creating clear guardrails and reinforcing the skills and behaviours required for modern ombudsman work. We have also spent time redefining the capabilities that we will need in our career framework, and that looks at those explicit expectations that we have for our people, both from a core capability but also at a functional level within their specific roles. And the sort of double benefit of that has been that that creates those career pathways as well for people, where people can see what that looks like at different stages of their career. We've then used both those sort of complaint handling model as well as the career framework to build our core learning program, particularly for our dispute resolution teams. And these programs are grounded in real scenarios and on-the-job learning, not just theory, because we've recognised obviously that that's how people learn, and that it's not about disseminating sort of point-in-time information only. It's that real embedded practical capability uplift and development that we've been focused on. We've been really deliberate too about how we structure our teams to build that targeted capability where it's going to make the biggest difference. And so a great example, I think, of this is that Care Connect team. So in wanting to address and support people better with vulnerability, we've actually created a team that is focused on supporting people and brings that deeper level of expertise to be able to help consumers that are dealing with specific vulnerabilities and things like that. That's also helped to reduce some of the pressure on our frontline staff to sort of be experts in everything that we know is just not really realistic and not practical for everybody. And obviously, as Leonie and Monique have both said as well, the reality of a very different world that we're all navigating at the moment, with really complex, particularly consumer behaviour going on, that has been a real focus for us. I think, like many of us, we're seeing more poor behaviour, the rise of the keyboard warrior and whatnot, but also the sort of anonymity that goes with a call where you can't see someone's face, I think has lent itself as a society to us seeing increasingly poor behaviours. So we've really focused on upskilling our people and building those skills around how to de-escalate, how to set boundaries, providing them with that professional authority to be able to navigate those circumstances. Looking ahead for us from a capability perspective at EWOV, our next focus is strongly on leadership capability. And it's not just about leaders who manage work, but leaders who are actively embedding learning, supporting growth, helping their teams navigate change, and creating the conditions for people to do the best work. We know that they're the supports and the guardrails that our people are going to need as they navigate these sort of periods of uncertainty. And obviously critical to the modern ombudsman and delivering on that commitment is the sort of trust and confidence placed in us as an organisation. And so we are going to be taking a very deliberate approach over the next couple of years around building trust, and we'll be doing some deliberate capability work around how to build trust, and recognising that it is actually a muscle and a skill that we all can build, not just an outcome of good decision making in relationships. So that's where we're at E1.
Cool. Thank you, Carolyn. I'm now going to flip back to Leonie. So how have you gone about defining the capabilities that you need now, but also ensuring that they meet the needs of the future Ombudsman's Office?
Thank you, Grant. At EWOC, we're actually part of the Queensland public sector, so we have adopted a broad Lead for Queensland framework. So that's actually made up of 3 different areas, result areas, I suppose, so vision, accountability and results. From there, what we've started to do really is contextualise what that means for us in practice within EWOC and the type of work that we do. What our requirement for certain capability, skills and knowledge are that fit within that. So over the last few years, we've run a number of facilitated workshops across EWOC, and that's included our leadership team and then our broader contingent of team members as well. And that is really to get an understanding of what the common capabilities are that are required across the agency, but then also to have an understanding of what those specialised capabilities are in the different work areas, obviously from dispute resolution through to HR and other corporate sort of functions as well. We've got a lot more work to do in this space, but currently what we've started to do, or what we're working on, is an alignment with our strategic planning. So the aim is that all of our frameworks and strategies aren't just created in isolation in the different business units across EWOC. So part of that work is defining our people strategy. That's one of our key focuses. And within that we have a pillar around talent and capability. So the capability piece really supports all the other elements of the strategic plan. So whether that's engagement broadly with our stakeholders, or the ICT roadmap, for example, and I've spoken about digital capability. But the capability of our people is the critical part to get it right and get those strategies enacted, essentially. So we need to continue to work across the agency, engage with our leaders, understand what those strategic priorities and directions are, and where we're heading as an organisation, and that allows us then to support and develop those capabilities that we need now and the ones into the future as well. There is an element of crystal ball gazing needed as well through all of this. So what we do continue to do, what's happening now, is we conduct environmental scans. We listen to what's happening across peer agencies and sectors, and this is why this interest group is actually really quite useful as we start to hear some common themes. We look across the sectors, we look at our workplace trends more broadly. Internally, we listen to our people, we look at the data sources that we have, and any other patterns. So really we're looking internally and externally to see what is happening in that space to be able to predict as well as we possibly can. Then we start to look at understanding what those capabilities are, again, in order for us to succeed in the environment that we're in. So often what we're seeing, though, is capabilities that have existed across a number of years. I suppose what we're starting to see, though, is the different context that they're appearing in. So, for example, here we are, we're talking about the impact of AI, and we've been talking about that for a number of years now. In the early years, the conversation was all around the impact on the workforce, the ability for AI to take on menial tasks, and that's obviously still occurring, still part of the horizon. But what we're starting to see now for us, it's in the context of the terms of the impact for in that dispute resolution space, for example. It's how, and more broadly, so how people are using it to assist with the various tasks, but AI is now embedded in CRMs. It's embedded, let's say, for example, Copilot, and how it's embedded within Microsoft products. So we're needing, again, to redefine what the context of the capabilities are in that space. Again, I suppose when you think of some of the other sort of broad, probably fairly relevant capabilities that are fairly common, things like I mentioned, the digital capability, but also that resilience and adaptability space. Those three have always been quite important, but I suppose they take on that different context now to what they did 5 years ago. When you think back 5 years, when we were talking about digital capability, resilience and adaptability, we were talking about that in terms of COVID. So that was in relation to things like online meetings and lockdowns, working from home. Today, that digital capability, resilience and adaptability looks different. It's around AI, again, learning and implementing new CRMs, portals, customer portals, stakeholder portals, complex cases involving that AI, the changing and increasing knowledge required with the jurisdictions and the technology change that we've mentioned, and that resilience piece that we've also covered in terms of, cost of living pressures and customer expectations. So we see a shift, same capabilities required, but a shift in the context. So it'll be really interesting to see whether they're still relevant in another 5 years, and what the context will be in 5 years' time.
Thanks, Leonie. Monique, one of the challenges with defining capabilities is ensuring that they don't sit as words on a page. How have you gone about embedding these new capabilities into your everyday work?
Thanks, Grant. I'm going to speak here specifically to the behavioural capabilities required of our people, because that's where we've done quite a bit of work over the past 12 months. So when I started here at E1 nearly 2 years ago, they were words on a page, and a lot of people probably couldn't find the piece of paper that had the words on the page. We had a behavioural competency framework that was quite complex. We had 54 competencies across 4 levels, and it was way too much for our people to connect with. So what we did is we redesigned this and we simplified it. We now have 3 key behavioural clusters around personal effectiveness, what I need to achieve for the business, and how I relate with people. And we also have a separate leadership cluster for our people leaders. How we embedded this was we socialised it with our people at the same time that we were redesigning our performance development and planning process. And so we asked our people for feedback. We sense checked, we made sure that it resonated with them, and we got their ideas around what was important. Once we developed this revised capability framework, we then incorporated it across the entire employee life cycle. So it informs our approach to recruitment. We introduced 12 months ago psychometric assessment as well as part of the recruitment process, to enable us to take a bit of a deeper dive into some of the core capabilities that we require of our people to be successful in their roles. And we also use that psychometric assessment for development purposes as well. So we can use that as part of career planning and development conversations. The capability framework is embedded into our probation check-in process. It's definitely embedded into our performance and planning and development cycle. So we use the capabilities as anchors and as aspirations to have discussions with our people around development. It might be around realignment in some cases. They're just as important to us as any of the other KPIs or metrics that might sit with our people in their performance plans. And the capability framework also underpins our whole approach to learning and development here at E1. So the behavioural capabilities, as I said, sit alongside the technical capabilities. And I know that my colleagues here on the panel are going to tap into that a little bit more detail a little bit later. But as Leonie was saying about, this at a more strategic level, we also have a strategic pillar in our strategic plan that is about being a capable and resilient organisation. And that encompasses not only the people capabilities, which is what I've been talking about, but that's about systems and processes as well. So this is actually multi-layered when we're talking about capability, which makes it even more complex. But yeah, there are several layers to this, is I guess the point I wanted to make.
Cool. Thank you so much. So we'll move on to topic 3. So assessing capability, knowing whether it's really there. And we're going to flick across to Marcus, who's been very quiet so far in this session. So a key factor in building capability is how bringing in new talent supports our goals of capability uplift. So how has your organisation moved away from the traditional recruitment approaches to address this?
Thanks, Grant. Yeah, so we've heard a lot about the modern Ombudsman office and what is required, that the capabilities and skills required of staff are changing. So I thought it would be useful to share an approach that we've used for the last few years that is really designed to assess the skills and capabilities that candidates have when they apply for a role. So I will share a few screenshots of that tool in a minute, just to make it a bit more visible. The organization is called Be Applied. It's based in the UK, and they have developed a system that kind of forces you to design tasks that are based on the skills and capabilities that you want to see in a candidate. So we'll try sharing my screen now, which of course is always a bit of a challenge. But I hope you guys can see this now. Yeah. Cool. So this is a dashboard of like the jobs that were current at the time, and I will focus today on the one here in the middle, the early resolution officer. And the reason why I'm focusing on that is for us at Utilities Disputes, the biggest challenge that we've seen over the last few years is a massive increase in complaints. We've seen an increase of about 500% over the last 4 or 5 years, and what that meant is that we had to really focus on early resolution and changing the early resolution team so that we can resolve as much as possible at that stage, rather than having all complaints go through the conciliation and investigation stage, where we need an in-depth investigation. We would just not be able to cope with the number of complaints that we received. So how it works is there's certain SIFT questions, is what the Be Applied platform calls this, and these are based on the skills and the capabilities you want to see. So for example, down here, it's about a distressed call. So, a disconnection call where someone has no electricity anymore. Now, this goes to what we've heard before, resilience, right? Like it's about how would you address this situation and help the customer, but also how would you kind of manage yourself so that you're not drawn into it too much, that you can maintain being a good person and respond to things. But the one I want to focus on today is one that was mentioned as well, and that's judgment. And this specific task this is about a complaint that will be quite familiar for our Energy and Water Ombudsman, which is a back bill based on so estimated reads for like 12 months, and then a back bill coming as a shock for the customer. And we have asking here, what is a fair and reasonable outcome and why? And the reason why we're asking this question of an early resolution officer, which we probably wouldn't have done in the past, is that one of the tools we are using is having the commissioner's decisions issued at this early stage to make sure that we resolve as many complaints as we can early. Now, how this works is, so you do it, you create a task, you select the skills that you want to test, and judgment really could be one of those in here as well. And then you have to have a review guide. So you say like, what's a 1-star, like quite a poor answer? What's an average answer? What is a really good answer? And then you get 3 to 5 people in the organization to assess those answers that you receive independently of each other. And once you've done that, you get something like this. You get a list of the highest performing candidates. And then you can invite those for an interview. So you can invite the top 3 or top 4, or you can have a hard line of like, we want only candidates that perform better than a 4 on average, for example. And then it goes to the next stage, which is the interview stage. And the interviews are quite structured there as well. So very structured questions. Again, something like a review guide for the interview panel. And quite importantly, they will assess those answers independently of each other, because one thing that one risk that is if you have an interview panel with a very senior person or with a hiring manager kind of talking first, is that the other interview panelists will kind of follow that kind of view, even if they don't really realize that. So the reason for Be Applied to advertise this platform, there are a few of those. So the first reason is the unconscious bias. That I've mentioned one in the interview, but even earlier on, one thing that people do without realizing is kind of looking at similarities. So if I find a candidate has studied at the same university, maybe the same subject, I'm just prone to think that person must also be good if I consider myself being a good worker. And the process here takes out cover letters, it takes out CVs, so you don't know who you're assessing until you meet them in the interview. So it's really addressing those unconscious biases. The thing that we at Utilities Disputes found very important, though, is another aspect of that, and that is broadening the pool of potential candidates. So the dispute resolution experienced staff or potential staff in Wellington, it is limited. So broadening the pool of potential candidates is quite important. And here with this process, anyone can apply. You don't need to show that you've done the job before. You just need to perform well in those scenarios, in those tasks. And finally, those applicants really enjoy this process more than just drafting a cover letter. They really like the fairness, the transparency in it. You get they all get feedback on which questions they've performed well and which questions they maybe haven't. And I mean, I don't know about you, but I still haven't found anyone who really enjoys looking at cover letters or looking at CVs. Yeah, I certainly don't really enjoy that, especially if it's 100+. Now, this process is much more interesting because you see, how different people think they, would respond to certain tasks. So this is kind of just a kind of a quick run through what we've been using, Grant.
Thank you for that. And Marcus, so what learnings have you had from trying and testing these different approaches?
Yeah, that's a good question, right? Like what's actually come from it. So we've hired a few really good people using this process, and some of those people we would not have hired otherwise. So that was a really empowering and interesting, experience for us. But I guess no recruitment process is perfect, right? Like we've had people who performed really well in here. And so they seem to know exactly what theoretically was required to be a good performer in that, but then unfortunately they didn't really put that into practice. So it's not perfect. AI was another one. If you have a task and say, what would you do if this happens? You can just copy and paste it in your favorite AI tool, and it will give you an answer. Now there are tools that be applied as implemented to flag those, but still it made quite a difference. When we started this, there was no AI, and now obviously there is, and it made quite a big difference in getting the quality that we wanted. Now we're actually moving away at the moment. We're moving away from using this tool. And there's probably one big reason for that. Now, I've mentioned the massive increase of complaints that we've had, and in winter there's always a big peak of complaints, and it was particularly big last year. So we will have to hire contractors for that time anyway to just deal with that workload. And of course, if you have contractors, they actually need to do the job, right? And if you have really good performers there, you can just offer them a permanent contract. So that's kind of the even more practical kind of assessment of how well people perform. So that's what we're going for this coming year. But we are using some aspects of this. So we certainly, when we do interviews, we try to really have that separate assessment and the discussion afterwards, so that that we're not influenced by the most senior person or the hiring manager. And we certainly also use practical tasks for during the recruitment process at some stage. So we've had really big success when we were recruiting for data and research analysts. We got many applicants, and we were going through CVs and cover letters, and we now put them down to a long list. But then we used that task to come from a long list to a short list, and it really helped separating the good candidates from the not so good candidates. And we're really happy now with those two people that we did hire. So that is really important for us to use that. Yes, so that's probably kind of my experience, our experience.
Yeah, thank you so much, Marcus. All right, topic 4, subject 4 is building capability, so sustaining performance and adaptability, and we're going back to Caroline on this one. So what does building capability look like in practice when the environment is changing faster than the formal training models can keep up?
Thanks, Grant. So, I mean, I think this is a challenge that many organisations face. But for us, it's meant fundamentally rethinking what capability actually is and shifting our focus away from it being something that you deliver at a point in time to something that you grow and constantly evolve. And so just sort of reflecting back, you know, when I think about when I first joined EWOV, capability development was often talked about in the context of sort of more information sharing or upskilling people through either an e-learn or a classroom session. It had sort of a fixed start and a fixed finish point, where sort of the expectation was around you undertook a course and as a result capability had been bestowed upon you, and tick, that was sort of done. And I think we can all appreciate that, you know, the stickiness, the impact of that probably wasn't as effective as where we needed it to be. Having said that, those types of sessions, e-learns, classroom, things like that, they still have an important role, particularly for establishing that real baseline knowledge. However, in that constantly sort of evolving environment, as I said, that model really no longer serves us, and we've really sort of recalibrated our understanding of capability so that, you know, information does not equal capability alone. And so for us, building capability in practice has meant letting go of that idea that capability is about courses, modules, static training programs. Technical expertise and relationship skills are absolutely still essential, but they're now sort of the baseline, and that's something that we really tend to assess on the way in through our recruitment process. There's absolutely still a role for e-learning and classroom-based learning to build capability, but we're making it practical, applied and embedded by people leaders on the ground. So we've moved away from that one-off learning model to more of a continuous, embedded, practical learning approach. So our capability programs are aligned directly to the capabilities that we expect in the role, both core and functional, but they're grounded in real scenarios that our people are facing and dealing with every day. So things like vulnerability, financial distress, poor behaviours, regulatory complexity. And that relevance really matters when the environment is constantly shifting, because abstract learning sort of doesn't stick and we need to make it really practical. And then that learning is then supported through good decision making on the job through their people leaders and coaches. And so for us, our dispute resolution core learning program now involves an integrated cycle of sort of e-learning, pre-learning that we've built in-house and aligned to that new complaint handling model that I mentioned earlier. And it's then supported by scenario-led classroom learning to practice and embed that learning in a practical way, followed by sort of embedment in their everyday roles. We've recently integrated this approach into our onboarding as well, and we're currently trialling a new approach in our investigations team called our EWOV Launchpad, where new joiners undertake some of that specific training and then have the classroom to really understand that learning in a practical way, followed by dedicated coaching and support to really help them get up to speed and improve that sort of speed to competency that we're all sort of aiming for when it comes to capability. One of the most important lessons for us has been that capability can't be separated from leadership, and that, you know, a critical role of being a leader is about uplifting the capability of your team and constantly evolving and adapting and supporting your people to navigate sort of new worlds, new complaints that they're facing. And that's why, as I mentioned earlier, we're moving into that second phase, which is much more explicitly on building leadership capability. So that will support our leaders to help them embed learning within their teams, operate as a coach, and that critical skill of giving and receiving real-time feedback. They're the things that are going to help us shift capability rather than just, you know, bestowing technical information at a particular point in time. Finally, though, and probably most critically, and I touched on this a bit earlier, is that when change is constant, judgment and critical thinking capability is the most important skill and capability that we can build in our people. So we've recognised that we cannot possibly train people for every single scenario that they will face. And, you know, in our experience, every scenario is just a little bit different and a little bit unique. And so instead, what we're trying to focus on is equipping them with those critical thinking skills, those strong decision-making framework that provides those guardrails, clarity about our purpose and our boundaries and our, you know, intention around what we're trying to achieve and what does good look like, and the confidence to apply those principles in real time. And for us at EWOB, that's shaping everything, including how we've redesigned that complaint handling model, and as well as how we've defined those capabilities in our new career framework. And it's really been about designing systems, leadership and supports that help people make good decisions when the next change inevitably will arrive. And, you know, as we've all touched on today, we don't really know what that change is going to look like. And that really helps to support us sort of future-proof, if you like, EWOB through the ambiguity, the uncertainty that we're all sort of facing into every day.
Mm. Thank you. Leonie, we'll flip across to you. So what are the core leadership capabilities that you feel are becoming increasing priorities, and what are you doing to address these capabilities in your organisation?
Thanks, Grant. So at EWOC, this is quite a focus for us at the moment. So looking at leadership capabilities, probably there's three elements that have stood out for us. One is around strategic leadership, but then the people leadership, and that compliance and governance piece as well. So they're all reasonably intertwined, and they also fit really neatly into that Lead for Queensland framework that I'd spoken of before, which was that vision, accountability and results area. Strategic leadership and vision, I suppose that is around the future proofing of our organisation, and doing that cohesively and collectively as a group of leaders, resourcing accordingly, equipping the individuals within it. It's about providing that direction, and as I said, that cohesion. The people leadership, a lot of what Carolyn was just talking about in this piece, and that's having those capabilities and skills to be able to engage, to motivate, to mentor, to guide, to coach, to delegate as well. How can you give your team members a sense of agency and accomplishment in this very complex environment that we're all working within? How do you allow for growth and development when we're all reasonably time poor? They're the sorts of things that I think are really critical in this people capability piece. Do you encourage continuous improvement? There again, elements involved in that accountability or compliance area. I suppose for us, that's where we there needs to be priority placed on our leaders understanding the policies that they're operating in, the legislation, the requirements that they have. Do they have good governance practices? Are they engaging with the strategies that we've got in place? Are they using those delegations as required? Are they across their EB requirements? Are they making consistent decisions? And they're the sorts of, I suppose, actions that will come out in employee survey results later as well. All three of those areas, though, really support that psychosocial safety in the workplace. We've recognised that the leadership group are really, they're critical and pivotal to how we are performing in that psychosocial space. So what we've started to do is design a leadership program that is around those three areas, recognising that many of the leadership cohort that we've got and team members across EWOC, they continue to value the technical expertise that our leaders have, as well as those broader leadership capabilities. As Carolyn mentioned too, I think it's one of the things that we've recognised is that it's that ongoing need to embed and create those learning opportunities for our leadership group. That's really critical, that opportunity to keep on developing the skills and do that in a consistent way as well. So we've got a few examples of what we've been trying to do in that space. Take our risk approach. What we're doing there is meeting monthly with our leadership group to bring them along on the journey. So they're involved in reviewing the risk appetite, our risk matrix, the registers, those sorts of elements. In that strategic planning space, we're involving them in the review of the strategic plan to make sure it's still fit for purpose for the next 4 years, and then engaging with them around the frameworks that sit underneath that. I mentioned employee engagement results. That's another piece of work where we are really empowering and expecting, I suppose, that leadership group will play a really pivotal role in communicating results and working with their teams at a local level to look at actions that might support some positive change as well. That's probably it from me. Thanks, Grant.
Cool. Thank you. All right, we've got a few minutes left. So what we're going to do is just do a quick zip around. If you had an unlimited budget for capability development, what would you do differently? Monique, we'll start with you.
I would use it to create the capacity to enable our people to allocate a proportion of their time on a regular basis to devote to capability building. And then I'd support that with tailored experiential learning and capability development that is focused on them building, but also maintaining their skills and the skills that are critical to success. So that's the technical and the behavioural, and then be looking for more opportunities to be able to provide to our people for them to apply that in a bit of a stretch way. So that's kind of what I'd love to do.
Cool. Leonie.
Thanks. I'm looking at it probably more from a systems perspective. I would love to align all of our HR systems across that employee life cycle, so we can map capabilities from the get-go and match with learning and development opportunities, look at it from a succession planning, performance plan sort of perspective as well. And I think that in the ideal world, if we were able to do that, I think that leans into that learning and development that's really embedded and reinforced over time.
Cool. Marcus.
Yeah, I thought, I focused on recruitment, so I'll answer this one in recruitment as well. So I recently went to an event where it was about, ensuring your recruitment includes people with neurodiversity and is designed to include them. And there was Chanel Moriah. She's a neurodivergent author and works at Autism New Zealand. And she explained one of the most significant changes that she has implemented was to completely change the recruitment process for New Zealand police. And instead of going through, cover letter CVs and all of that, they invited all potential candidates to a one-day workshop where they had to work together and carry out actual police tasks, and they could assess on like actual work on their actions. So if I had unlimited budget for recruiting, I would implement something similar, something like that at utilities disputes, because I mean that's kind of gets the closest to just getting people in and work and see how they do, in my view. So that's what I do.
Yeah, cool. Finally, we come across to Caroline.
I struggle with this question, Grant, because it sort of makes my mind go to 1,000 different places of things that I would love to be able to do. But I think actually what I would probably want to do is to employ a number of people as coaches where that is their primary role, and they would operate both as coaches for our people leaders and really sort of ensure that all people leaders have access to a coach to help them understand their blind spots, what gets in the way, but also to really experience what great coaching looks like. And then the other way that I think that I would use those coaches would also be around team coaches, because I think the power of having good team dynamics and having teams work and operate in flow can just really change people's experience of work and their effectiveness and things like that. So I think having an unlimited budget for coaches and things like that would be amazing.
Cool. All right. Well, thank you all for your time today. That's all the questions that I have. And where do we go from here? Monique, do we finish with you?
Yeah. Thanks, Grant. Yes, look, thank you everybody for attending today. We hope that some of the information that we've shared has given you, maybe prompted some new ideas for you in your organisations. We welcome anybody to reach out to us following this with any additional questions that they might have. We realised there was a lot of stuff that we wanted to talk about. I mean, we could keep going for another 2 hours, I'm sure. Yeah, thank you very much to the panel as well for sharing their insights and some of the work that they've been doing in their organisations. I think one of the things that we keep talking about in the People and Development Interest Group is that it doesn't matter where we are, how large or small we are, we're actually all dealing with the same sorts of things with our people, which is why we all get so much from the conversations that we have, 4 times a year. But yeah, thank you very much for your participation. Thank you, Janine, for introducing us. And I guess we'll let everybody get on with their day now. Thank you.
Thanks all.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks.